One day had John 117 got orders from the United Nations Space Command that they had received a message that the Covenant Empire had recently captured a human, and, and the command wanted John and his team to go to the planet Doisak to rescue this particular person because they have no idea if this person was highest ranking officer or a high ranking scientist, but they didn't want to allow any humans to be captured by a former enemy or a belated Covenant Empire. John promised that he would try to as much as he could to try to save this person, even if it means the sacrifice of his own life. The team went to the planet Doisak. During his mission, he had no much information to give his team when they asked him much about some details of who this particular person is. But John said that he didn't know because the command had no idea either, because they had received a message from unknown source stating that the Covenant Empire had captured a human person, a female, but that was all the message said. They didn't state it if this person was high-ranking military officer or even a scientist or anything. But still, the other team members was still curious to know more about details about this information. But since John had no much other further information, even despite he had required to have been requested sent back to the United Nations Space Command for more details, but they would have sent the said same thing because they didn't have much information, because they tried to contact this supposed unknown source, but it was unlikely that would never happen. Because just before they left Earth, the command actually told John that they had tried to find out who this unknown source were and even tried to reach out to this particular unknown individual. But it was unresponding back to him. So John was here given the orders to save the person and bring it back to Earth for medical treatment and even for interrogation and try to figure out who and why this particular person was captured by the Covenant Empire in the first place. They haven't been in war with them for quite some time, so why would they suddenly capture a human being despite that they haven't been at war with them? John promised he would do so, and when they arrived, they decided to only go to try in stealth mode. After they managed to go inside this strange facility, despite not have no map how this facility was located or how it was described. But after several tries to avoid any sort of being detected by sensors or any of the guards, but they managed to find the room where this strange female was held. Two of John's members was Captain Kidd was standing guard while he walks in. He was surprised to see her for because one thing that was standing out of her that she was dressed unusual. He has never seen any civilian or any scientist in that type of outfit before. But it was another thing that actually did notice about her. She had pointy ears. And he has never seen any human being with a pointed ears. But he knew they had a very, very limited contact and very limited time to even discussing about this. So he said he's here to save her, and even though that she would not refuse to listen to him, but he's explained he's here to save her because this enemy, or it was supposed to be, could be back any moment. Because he experiences another past. They will probably torture her or perhaps even killing her in a worst case. Realized she explained that she had no idea who they are and why they captured her. But even before then, she explained that she would go with them as long as they promised to keep her safe because she is very important, she said. Then he promised. Just before they were about to leave, they were all protected. But luckily for the team, they had the ship scooping down and managed to hop in the ship and took off before even the enemy were able to catch them. And when they were about to leave the planet's surface, they were detected by two of enemy spacecrafts. But luckily, they managed to activate the slipstream, travel, and went back in that. So during the time on when they were heading back to Earth, John was curious to know more about this particular woman. Why she was so very important, and why she's dressed like that and this pointed ears. Even his team had also noticed this. They tried to ask her what her name is. She said that her name is Zelda, and they even asked her which planet she's from, because they had never seen anyone like this before, at least a human being with pointy ears. She said that she doesn't even know what planet she's from, but that she's a princess of the kingdom of Hyrule. All the team members, including Jon, looked at each other with curious, puzzled minds, like they never actually heard of any sort of place called Hyrule before. They explained it to her, but she explained that her family had been ruling the kingdom for centuries. They then Jon had even been given order just prior they left Earth that he was doing some sort of a short interviewing this particular woman, like getting more details if she is on some sort of mission or why they were capturing her. So he started asking her some of those questions. And he even told her when they would go back to their base on their homeworld, she will be targeted even some more questions. But she just said, as long as they don't hurt her or even do any harm. Then he said that they won't do any sort of things, only they want to know more details of why they captured her or why she was end up on that facility. She explained that she was back home in her own castle when suddenly she ended up in on that particular place. All their friends, the other team members, just looked at each other. What did you mean that you were not in that place if you were in your own castle? Did they attack you, capture you from your own home? But she said no, because as she was standing in her own place, in her own room, she was reading a book that contained some old spells. And that she was reading one of the spells because she was very skilled in magic. As she mentioned that, the other team members just looked at each other and looked at her and back at each other again and started laughing. They thought that she was crazy. They thought that they even explained magic. There is a such thing as magic. Just old fairy tales back on Earth. We don't even believe in magic anymore," said the team members. But John, he was silent. Despite he has experienced so much over his years doing service to the United Nations Space Command. But he didn't even laugh, because he had experienced a lot of things. He had seen some old, prehistoric human ships, cities on different planets. It even been a combat of different species that most of his team members haven't even been encountered themselves yet. So he wasn't even telling them. So he told them, stop doing that. That's an order. John took with Zelda to a different room where they could talk more privately. He even offered her some water because, as he tried to be polite, despite being a whole trained soldier, but he was also being trained to be some sort of diplomat in this sort of situation, if it would appear to that. He tried to give some more information from her, like what he meant with magic. All she meant that she had been practicing magic ever since she was a kid, and everyone in her kingdom either could or perform magic on their own. There were even some magical artifacts that could even grant some a person temporarily magic or even grant them some sort of magical powers as long as they obtained this object. John even wanted to know more about herself, like why is she was even captured in the first place, and what kind of spell that she did use. She explained that she was using some sort of teleportation spell. So supposed to be traveling allow her to travel some either long or short distance travel destination. She decided to maybe travel maybe as 1 feet in front of her just in case and to see if this works. But apparently, as she did so, she realized she must have read some part of the spell wrong because it could not unless that not if she did, that is the only explanation that she that she can come up with. Even John did ask her why didn't she just use a spell to go back home? Maybe even though she explained after that she ended up in that strange facility where she were. She actually did use a spell, but it didn't work. She tried at least 3 times of the same word because she had to memorize the words in right order if the spell to work. But it didn't. And she didn't exactly know why, because after the third trial, she was spotted by some guards, and before she even could react, she was captured. They tried to talk to her interrogation room, but she didn't understand a single word. One of them tried to talk to her in English. She did manage to explain, but she refused to even respond to any of those questions, even in English. Even John Doe was still didn't even believe any of this. But somehow deep in his heart, he wanted to believe her. But first of all, he didn't even have seen anything like it, like magic before. So he explained that he has seen different things over his course of time, but he's never experienced any sort of magic or magical creatures, beings, or even magic itself. She even asked him, like, when will they arrive to this base that is called? And he explained within a few hours. So he told her that if he wants to have something to eat before then, he can arrange some food that they have on board, which she accepted. He left her alone, even though the other crew members were still talking about this strange woman. She must be insane because believing in magic has must been they must believe that, and even this enemy must have believed some of this. But John then just looked at his team members and said, if she isn't even telling the truth, we still have the order to bring her back to Earth. No matter what happens, that is our standing orders, and you will obey it. Yes, sir, said everyone else. But even though that when John was in the cockpit, when he was in the command part of the ship, he was still thinking about this particular woman. Even though when they arrived back to Earth, she was taken to this interrogation room, but he had one request that if he would be allowed, or either outside or into the same room as protection, just in case if something would go wrong, and he allowed. After all, since Zelda and John had somehow been connected in some part, or at least respected each other for this particular reason. And especially when Zelda explained to other people that she is part of a magical kingdom, they couldn't even believe her. They even tried to convince her, telling her the truth. But she said everything she told them was the truth. She even did actually perform a lie detector test on her, but the test showed she actually was telling the truth. But they even asked her if she could perform the magical spell again, trying to see if they can work this time. Maybe it was the environment, or maybe she was stressed out or worried about something. And she did try. And this time she was actually calm. And she maybe had a point. Maybe it was that she was stressful, disoriented, and that she didn't know exactly what you were. And there was something though. Despite knowing how much they didn't know though, she tried to use the spell again and again and a third time. But no luck, no effect at all. She believes maybe this spell doesn't even work in this place. But then the one scientists have actually some impossible theory why this doesn't even happen, or why she ended up in this world in the first place. He believes this possibility, at least, that she is from another universe or parallel dimension or something, and that the spell that she was using, and when she was misread some part of the spell by accident, it must have caused her teleportation, but at the same time being transported, maybe some sort of dimensional rift, and that was what she caused her to end up in this particular universe, and especially on the planet Doisak. Doisak, though, even though that the command sent back some probes and even some ships in orbit just to scan the ship and the planet for any more other details, other humans, but nothing. And Zelda had only one request from the team, though, from the scientists, if she would be allowed to leave. But the high command of of the United Nations Space Command refused that for a moment. They couldn't even allow her to get free because they didn't know if they could trust her, despite saying that she is from another dimension. But she would be allowed to leave as long as she stood behind John and other two guards with her, and they allowed that. Despite though that they had taken some blood tests and even some DNA from her, even scans on her, she almost appeared to be identical as a human being, except for those pointed ears and that she seems to be having at least higher ability to be resisting pain. And she explained that she could perform magic, but seems like it has magic somehow been drained of her from some point. Even after that, she has been had to maintain in this base for constant watch in a locked room for almost entirely time she was staying there. But after about a year of being staying there, she was allowed to leave the facility, and she was even granted a full census human census on Earth. But even though that when she was living on Earth, she had no idea what to do because Devon had been offered to be part of the United Nations Space Command as a soldier, but she refused. She said even though she's a skilled fighter, she refused to be in a warrior of any sort of battles or anything. Only she wanted to go back to her own home kingdom. Even despite that, after all this happened, after they had after it has been a year since she had ended up on Earth, John and his team was still out in the galaxy for fighting about the different battles and even something like that. But there was only one thing on his mind, and that was Zelda. Despite that he was a soldier and that he was often not on Earth as more than maybe for a few days to maybe a week at a time. But there was one thing that kept him sane over even during these battles against enemies or even during deep space exploration. And that was Zelda. Despite he was knowing that he may never have been able to see her once again. But the next time when he came back to Earth, he had decided to talk to her, maybe seeing her some more, get to know her better. Despite that now she had her own place in the city of New Phoenix. She was actually working as a teacher, but not as one that she thought she would be. She was actually a teacher in self-defense class. Apparently, that was a good hit. She was even showing some of her own people's defense techniques and that, combined with some she learned from John, and it's a great hit though. But it was one thing. Even though John knew maybe that he and Zelda would never end up as an item or as a couple, but knowing that she likes him and he likes her. But it was another thing though. John had been thinking about leaving United Nations Space Command's service for definitely. But he was not allowed after first because he still had to take care of his duty. But after he had returned back to Earth the same time though, after about a year, he actually went up to talk to the High Command about this. Even his superiors, and he said that he wanted to leave the service. and he would want to retire. He was feeling old enough. He was like in his 40s or 50s, but even he felt young, but he was like in his early 50s and something like that. Despite that, his superiors first needed to take some time to think on it, and they actually thought about it, and after a couple of days, they granted his retirement from the service. But he even said if they needed his help, he probably would say that he would go back, depending, of course, from what source it is. But they had asked him, what will he do after he had retired from the service? He probably will take a teaching job at a school or something, or maybe training, or maybe work as a local gym instructor, maybe. But that actually didn't seem to be working for him though, because he tried to work in a gym instructor class, but didn't work out for him. But there was one thing that kept him working well. After that, he didn't fit that for that work, but he actually became a military training instructor for the some sort of service for the command, which he allowed to do so. But during this particular time, he had actually been dating Zelda. Zelda and John seem to be working well together, despite their two different worlds, but they actually seems to be working well though. But there was one day when John had been offered to be a captain of his own ship, but refused. He said that he preferred his standing job as a training coach instructor rather than being a fight. And after that, John and Zelda had been dating for about 4 years. He thought maybe it was time to settle down and start a family, even that he maybe he would not be able to have a family with her. But he actually did propose, and she said yes. They even had a wedding, but a small wedding though. Only a couple of weeks after that, he proposed to her. Even though he was still working as this instructor, he actually decided maybe it was time to settle down. And after about a year, after they had been married for a whole year by then, Zelda and John was happy to find out they were expecting a baby, despite knowing that they maybe would not be able to have a baby, but they had. And they in fact had a baby daughter, which they named Sarah. Even when Sarah was about 5 years old, they had another baby, which they had a boy, which they named John Jr. Even though knowing that the mother had from a different origin, they usually ask her mother how was like her home were, and if she misses her home still. Stella did explain that she do miss her home from time to time, but as long as she is happy here on Earth with her own family, despite knowing that she may not be able to go back home, she was happy. Even for John, though, knowing how things turned out for he, from a very active soldier from the United Nations Space Command for so long time, end up retired and to be as a training coach instructor for the service, and that he ended up marrying with the same woman he saved with his team years earlier. Despite knowing how they were be different worlds, but he didn't care about that. He had actually other friends who actually were humans, but still from different planets in the galaxy. Even encountered some high respected other people from other worlds as friends, and also were aliens. But he was actually happy to be with someone that he likes, and this is how John hundreds 11 John and Zelda found a true love for a big family. The end.